In this lesson, we're going to become familiar with variables. Now, what exactly are variables? Variables are essentially data storage mechanisms inside your programs. Now, these are extremely important because if you think of the term information technology, which is used to describe computer and mobile internet technology globally, internet and information, these two are related, and the information inside your program starts off by being stored as variables, and then the variables themselves get stored into databases, and that becomes information of the future. Now, in order to understand a variable is a storage mechanism inside the memory of your computer. You can think of a variable as a type of box inside the computer's memory. Now, if we understand something about storing things, not just information, when we're talking about storing things in our home, we use different types of containers of different sizes to store different items. For example, if you have a half a liter of juice to store, you'll find the smallest possible container that would fit that and then put it into the fridge. In the same way, if you are storing cereals, you could store it in a box and put it away in the cupboard. You will not store a liquid inside a box because a liquid will damage the box and it will start to leak. In the same way, if you need to store a half a liter of liquid in your fridge, you're not going to put it into a 5-liter container because it's just a waste of space. So depending on what you want to store and what sort of quantity you want to store, you will choose a container. Now, in the same way with programming languages, we have a memory location, and based on what we're going to store, what type of data we're going to store into that memory location, is it going to be text, is it going to be numbers, is it going to be an image, is it going to be an MP3 file? So based on that, we have to determine, or we have to declare the type of the variable, what type of data we're going to store. And obviously every variable needs a label, which helps us as well as the computer to identify exactly which variable we are referring to, and of course the contents of the variable. Just as you would put something into a box, a variable needs contents. So you'll create a variable, give it a name, and then you'll put something, or you'll store something into that variable. Now, returning to our program, we'll see how we can create and use variables in Java. To start off with, we're going to create a variable of type string. Now remember, we mentioned in a previous lesson that a string is simply text. It's just the name given to text. So we first declare the type of the variable, what's going to be stored into that variable. Then we give the variable a name. We'll call this variable my message. Alright, so my message is a variable. That's the label we're going to give to this variable. The type of the variable is string, and what's going to be the contents. And there we have our contents. So this line will create a variable of type string, call it my message, and populate it with this message here, which is hello, this is my message. Now, how do we use a variable once we've declared it? Very simple. You use a variable by simply calling its name. So now we go into our message dialog, and instead of a literal string of text between double quotes, we simply place the name of the variable. So what's going to happen is when Java encounters this, it's simply going to substitute the name of the variable for the actual text that's stored in the variable. Let's run our code. And there we have it. Now, in the same way that you have the variables of type string, you also have certain variables that can store numbers. For example, let's make a number type variable. A number type variable is stored as an int. Int is short for the word integer. Now, if you have a number that doesn't have a decimal point, doesn't have a fraction part, then that number is an integer. For example, the number 3 is an integer, the number 7 is an integer. However, the number 6.5 is not an integer because it has a fractional part. So now let's start with integer numbers. So we'll say int, we'll call this num1, and we'll store in it the number 4. Let's create another variable. We'll call this one num2, and we'll store in it the number 6. Alright, and then we're going to use these variables in yet another dialog box. So we'll call up a show message dialog, beg your pardon, and we're going to use these two variables. Num1, we'll do a simple addition sum, num1 plus num2. Can you figure out before we run this what the actual result is going to be? So let's compile it. It's always a good practice to compile your code before running it. Although you can sometimes run it, but usually once the code is compiled and then you run it, it might just run a previously compiled version. So to be on the safe side, simply compile and then run. Okay, that's the first message dialog. I okayed that, and there we have it, 10. So what Java has done clearly is that it's replaced num1 with 4, and it substituted num2 with 6, added them up, 4 plus 6, and evaluated the answer, which is 10, and output the answer. So this is how we create and work with variables in Java and other programming languages.